Welcome, welcome. Just a few house rules. If you could put yourself on mute while the webinar is going ahead, that would be much appreciated. And during the Q&A section, if you'd like to use the raise hands function to indicate whether or not you'd like to speak. And then it would be great if you could turn your cameras on just so we can identify who's speaking and put a face to the name and the voice as well. So the agenda for today is some introductions. So myself, I am Onyeka Onyekwelu from LOTI, the London Office of Technology and Innovation. It's so good to see so many of you here, some of you who aren't from London boroughs as well. We'd like to say a huge welcome, and we hope that you find this session beneficial. So as well as myself, we'll also be hearing from Eddie Copeland, who's the director of LOTI, and he'll be shedding light on why we're holding this session in the first place, so a bit of background as to why we created the project, what we hope to achieve, as well as why we're running this session for you. And then afterwards, we'll hear from Dan Ebanks, who's from Social Value Exchange. And this is an organisation that seeks to put community needs at the heart of public tenders. And he'll be speaking a bit about the work that he's done with Tower Hamlets. And then after that, we'll give you all an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. And as I say, if you have any questions, please do use the raise hand function. And then once we call your name, if you could put your cameras on just so that we can identify who's speaking. Okay, now I'll just hand over to Eddie.
Thank you very much, Onyeka. So yeah, just a few words of background why LOTI's interested in this topic. No doubt for many of you who are working closely with us, this will be familiar, but on two counts, we thought this webinar would be interesting. Number one, because we're doing a lot of work with you and your colleagues on innovation in procurement at the moment. And if you go to loti.london/resources, you'll find, for example, our innovation in procurement toolkit that we developed with you and your colleagues and with Public, the GovTech Accelerator, trying to outline how boroughs can change some of their own processes in order to get better value from the companies that serve them, particularly tech suppliers. And I think one of the things I've been most impressed by with Social Value Exchange is their commitment to making sure councils get the most value for them and their communities as part of their large procurements. On a related note, we're doing a lot of work right now on digital inclusion, and we know that digital inclusion is a key priority given how much of our lives are now done like this, done sitting in front of a computer screen. And we were interested to note recently that Social Value Exchange had worked with Tower Hamlets, where using the social value portion of a contract specifically to get devices related to their digital inclusion initiative. So on that front as well, we thought the concept was interesting, particularly as we're looking for funding streams. It's a real pleasure to be able to welcome Dan to present today. I first met Dan when I was still working at the Innovation Foundation Nesta, and there we were keen to support his work and bringing innovation, bringing that sort of bottom-up community-led approach to the world of procurement. We know this is hugely important for boroughs, and we hope you'll find what Dan has to say interesting. So on that note, Dan, over to you.
Thanks very much, Eddie. I'll just give you a bit about myself before we started doing all of this work around social values. So my career began really in the early 2000s, coordinating a community economic development partnership in Hackney in East London, which really was a kind of an eye-opener for me, looking at the kind of challenges that those sorts of organisations faced. I then worked for a number of management consultancies where for about 13 or 14 years worked on a number of, I guess, efficiency programs, second generation IT procurements and kind of lean performance improvement management programs. After a few years, the penny did drop, and I began to think about, instead of trying to squeeze efficiencies out of a system, it might be time to look at new systems and new ways of doing things. So the team that I lead now, and that's really from 2015 when we first received some pre-seed investment from Bethnal Green Ventures, which is a tech for good accelerator. We have a team now made up of experienced community development folk, procurement folk, product managers, software developers, and evaluation practitioners. We're a member of Social Value UK. We're SROI accredited, and as Eddie mentioned, we've had funding from Nesta's Share Lab programme. We've been supported by Innovate UK and also, as I mentioned, by Bethnal Green Ventures, which is based not in Bethnal Green, just on the edge of Spitalfields, I believe. And as from last week, I'm back in Hackney. We've now just signed up Hackney Council to the Social Value Exchange. So really looking forward to kind of working again with some of the people that are still there from 2002, 2003. So moving on to what is social value and how we can make it work for local communities. Now, I'm sure that you will all have a view of what you think social value is, and I'm just going to share our worldview on social value. I think for us, if social value is about creating community benefits per the legislation, then the VCSE sector has to be front and centre. Now, to date, that's not entirely been the case. I think to date, we've seen the evolution of social value being characterised by a quest almost for a perfect metric, and it's understandable. It's to enable contracting authorities to be able to objectively assess one supplier's social value offer against another within the tender process. We've seen a number of online social value calculators spring up, and I would say, because they're online, dare I say it, they are scalable. And that means that they're reductive, top-down, and in our view, unable to capture the unique strengths of what's actually happening on the ground at ground level. So if you've got something amazing that's working out in the community in terms of generating and creating community benefits, if it doesn't fit that top-down metric, then to all intents and purposes, it's rendered invisible, which to me is dysfunctional. And I think more importantly, while this approach is making social value work for suppliers and contracting authorities, it's not making it work for the real end beneficiaries, which I think risks undermining the whole sort of space. So next bullet, please. So for us, measurement is necessary, but it's the source, it's not the stake, as it were. So when we look at the Social Value Act, you look at it from a slightly different perspective. On the one hand, you've got your suppliers that are being asked to create social value, but it's not necessarily their area of expertise. But they do have resources, particularly the larger suppliers. They'll have laptops that can be repurposed. They'll have lots of bid writing expertise. They'll have project management skills, budgeting know-how. On the other hand, you've got VCSE organisations that are creating social value, although they just call it their day job, but without sufficient resource. So for us, the focus has been more on matching rather than measurement as the best way to create social value that's community-led and where it makes the biggest impact per place. So in the next slide, we've got an animation that sums all of that up in a much more succinct way. I need the volume.
I can't hear any sound on that at the moment, Onyeka.
Yeah. What is social value? The Social Value Act is a legislation that allows government to ask their suppliers to give something back in the geographical areas in which suppliers are delivering services, goods, or works on behalf of the government. It's relatively new, dating from 2013 and woefully underused. Each year, government spends hundreds of £billions on private sector suppliers. During the government buying process, government asks suppliers to submit proposals as part of a competitive bidding process. Proposals to win contracts are evaluated in terms of price and quality, and following the legislation coming into effect, social value. That's right, the government now has the legal basis to ask suppliers to support their local communities. More than that, often how much suppliers offer in way of resources determines who government awards the contract to. That may sound dodgy, but it's all part of a transparent legal process, and many suppliers have a corporate social responsibility strategy and budgets, so government is pushing at an open door if they could come up with a smart approach to capturing social value. When we came across the Social Value Act, we saw an opportunity. We saw straight away that a marketplace approach could work. We were inspired by Airbnb and Uber, so-called sharing economy businesses, whose marketplaces use tech and data to create matches between those who have excess capacity and those who need it. So how do we apply this to social value? Our thinking went like this. On the one hand, you have suppliers who are being asked by government to create social value in local communities. Suppliers have resources, but they don't have local insight, are not plugged into local networks, and lack awareness of local histories and politics. On the other hand, local community organisations have the insight, are often a hub in the local network, and are more than aware of local histories and politics, but they lack resource, IT, access to space, and business expertise, for example. What if we could match these organisations? We would be able to create a win-win for both. Create optimal matches by using tech and data, and we would have something of real value.
Okay, so that's a
Social value.
that's an animation that we share with lots of our customers and lots of our users, suppliers, and community-based organisations. So let's just get into a little bit more of the detail in terms of how it works. Next bullet, please. So the social value exchange matches supplier resource and local community projects during procurement exercise. So, for example, a housing association will begin a procurement exercise, for instance, for an estate services contract. We'll have a number of big suppliers bidding for that contract. In the process of doing so, they'll submit their proposal based on price, quality, and social value. Now, rather than writing in social value project into their tender documents, their tender response, what they'll do is come to our platform, the Social Value Exchange, where they'll find, next bullet, please, community projects who've submitted resource wish lists, often digital devices, expertise like bid writing, support, sometimes some funding. Now, it's important to note two things here. First, any community project can register, but those that are delivering project outputs that are linked to local place-based outcomes selected by the contracting authority will stand to receive more resource than those that are not. That's the way that the platform has consciously been designed. So in other words, the contracting authority, the council, can't choose which specific projects can receive resource, but can decide which type of community project receive resources. There are other criteria that we've built into the platform that can be used. So for example, it might be that you only want community projects with revenues below 50 grand a year. So real grassroots organisations able to receive resource. The key thing is that if you're delivering projects in the community that contribute or complement the council's broader commissioning and community outcomes and goals, you'll get more resources. Point number two, this relates to the type of resources. Community projects, when they're building their wish list, can only choose from a predetermined menu of options. They can't choose whatever they like. And typically those resources that they can choose, it's stuff that every organisation will need, real core capacity building resources like IT hardware, expertise, etc., etc. This is stuff that every organisation needs, but also stuff that bigger suppliers can give at the same time. Now, back to the suppliers. Next bullet, please. So the suppliers will respond to these resource wish lists, but they'll do so across the platform, which is an auction. And we've used an auction to maximise the resources. So the supplier that makes the best offer wins the auction, and with it secures the maximum social value tender points. Now, the important thing here is that we share information during the bidding. It's a live auction. We share information during the bidding, which means that suppliers can bid strategically. So we anonymize the suppliers, but suppliers can see where they are in the ranking, and they can see the lead offer. and they can tailor their next offer, if they choose to make one, with that information. So they can bid strategically and they can bid efficiently. Next slide, please. So here are some of the benefits, first of all, for VCSE organisations. Next bullet, please. So free resources, free for the community-based organisation. The only cost for these organisations is the time that it takes to register onto the platform. Now, as I've mentioned, digital devices, business expertise, cash funding, if it's available, access to space, although that's not something that we've seen much of in the last sort of 6 to 9 months. Next bullet, please. It's quick for community projects. The lead-in time is much quicker than the time it takes to get a grant, from going through the application process to doing all of the paperwork afterwards. Next bullet, please. And once we've onboarded local community-based organisations, they have access to our networks of suppliers and other VCSE organisations. Let's move on to the next slide, which is benefits for the contracting authority. First bullet, please, thanks. So just to reiterate, the contracting authority can't choose which community projects get resources, but it can choose the outcomes, which in turn determines which type of community projects get resourced. So what we see here is a link between the social value and the community benefits that are created, a kind of golden thread all the way through to local place-based outcomes. Next bullet, please. Objective scoring of suppliers in the tender process via the auction. We use a simple point system that means that suppliers can be scored objectively, and we'll have a quick look at that in a moment. Next bullet, please. We asked the community organisations for feedback, and we actually incentivise them for their feedback. So with that data that comes back, contracting authorities are able to both track and ensure that suppliers are delivering against their commitments made, but also begin to build a picture of what community-based organisations are delivering and where, which in turn can begin to build a clearer view of what's happening across the borough and can be used to inform smarter commissioning decisions. And final bullet. And then I mentioned the online calculators that have sprung up. When it comes to actually evaluating what's going on, we are quite old-fashioned in this sense, and I think that's important because I think you need to have an evaluation approach that incorporates quantitative and qualitative research methods that really lets you understand what's being created and how effective that's actually been. Next slide, please. So some useful numbers. I mean, I've just mentioned the importance of qualitative research methods, and this ratio was generated as part of a piece of independent research that was undertaken about the social value exchange as part of the investment by 4 housing associations. So I would urge, I'd always urge some skepticism when it comes to these sorts of numbers, but I think it demonstrates that we are moving in the right direction and we are having an impact. Next bullet. Next point. So far we've supported £50 million worth of procurement spend. So we're a proven model, and we've got much more kind of coming through the pipeline. I mentioned Hackney. We've just signed with them for 4 years. So there's a significant amount of stuff in the pipeline as well. Final point here. And 4.1 million of resources has been delivered to community projects. Next slide, please. Right, so talking to Eddie and the team, and the reason that this conversation kind of emerged, I guess, was really around the work that we've been doing for an East London local authority over the summer and into the autumn. And we've been working with them now for a while. So they put through £2.8 million worth of procurement through the platform over the summer and the autumn. For quite small contracts, actually. I think the smallest one was around 1,000, and that's by some way the smallest procurement that we've supported. And of course, what's come to light since COVID-19 hit is this is really as a result of the need to work from home and to homeschool, is that something like 1.8 million families across the country don't have access to a digital device. So it was something that the East London Local Authority, Tower Hamlets, was keen to address using the social value exchange. So we in terms of the resource wish list, we began to see a lot more laptops being requested. Now, through that £2.8 million worth of procurement spend, we managed to generate 13 laptops to be allocated to local community projects and underserved households. Now, that doesn't sound like a huge number. However, we're contracted to support up to £70 million worth of procurement spend for the local authority, which theoretically could see up to 322 households receive a laptop or a tablet. So you can see how that is, in my view, quite a significant kind of dent in terms of that broader digital inclusion challenge, specifically around that kind of digital deficit, if you want. So that's what we've been able to do with one local authority, and it's certainly something that a lot more of our customers are looking at now as well. And we're also looking to have discussions with central government around how we can leverage some of that central government procurement. Next slide, please. Right, so now I'm going to show you briefly, if the time is right. I've set up a one bidding round, and I'll take you through it now. And this is really just to show you what it looks like from the supplier's point of view. So I'm going to sign in. I've set up a bidding round, and I'll sign in now. If we can switch to my screen, is that something that you do, guys, or is it for me to do that?
Yeah, that's fine. So I've just stopped sharing. So if you could start sharing on your end.
Okay. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this page. Now there's all sorts of kind of things that happen before we get to this point, but I'm going to kind of shortcut all of that. And as a supplier, I've already received my login details from the Social Value Exchange team, so I'm going to put those in now. And we're going to go in as NG or ONG, depending on which part of the world you're from. Okay, so this is what you come through to. This is the supply control panel, and if you click on e-auctions here, you can see that we've got the 33 demo procurement exercise set up. So we're going to go through to that. It's almost 2 o'clock, which is when the auction, I believe, is due to start. So we'll go through now. Okay, so you can see across the bottom here, you've got the countdown. So it's almost open, the bidding round. So it's Springfield. We've just kind of ripped off the Simpsons council, and I've just popped in some basic information in here. And this is the panel that we'll use to let suppliers know that they're in the right place. Now, it might be that the supplier has been through the process before and they can bid now. It may be that they haven't, so they may need some information. So we've got the rules, guidance and steps here. Brings you down to the bottom of the page and various bits of information that the supplier would already be familiar with. We tend to give access to the platform a week before the bidding round begins so they can familiarise themselves with the whole process. Now, in terms of the contribution, when we set the auction up, we chose this outcome, but we have about 12 other outcomes which are have been distilled from pretty much all of the outcomes that every council has. If we scroll down, we've got the resources that have been requested. So we've got a number of laptops, printer, projector, for example. We are encouraging our customers to really just focus on the kind of laptop and mouse at the moment. Here we've got the when the auction is taking place, you can pop that into your diary, and as we've seen, we've got the information here, guidance information. Now you can bid now, and we've got the rest of this hour to bid, but we'll just go through now. So here again, we've got the same resources here. And we've also got a bit of local supply chain as well. We can put apprenticeships in here, which is the kind of stable social value ask that we tend to see. So we'll go and make a bid. So we'll put in, if I put in 6 laptops, we'll see that there's been a cap that's been put in. You cannot be higher than 5. So here's the cap there, and it's 5. So let's pop in for the first round. We'll pop in 3. And a projector. We've had some quite odd requests over the years. So here you see that tops up at 1350 credits or points, and we'll give them the supply chain. So you can see here that we've got the total score, the running total, and we'll now submit the bid. Just to make sure that this is what you want to do. Okay. So it's as simple as that for the supplier. We share with them access to our kind of knowledge center, which has a whole host of guidance materials ranging from videos down to one-pagers, down to the kind of, chunkier standard operating procedure type documents, so that they have all of the information that they require to go through the process. But as you can see, it's a very simple process. And yeah, we the team are on hand as well during the auction to support them and help them through any technical issues. So that's how that works. I think now it's back to the LOTI guys for Q&A. So I'll just stop down and hand over back to Onyeka.
Thanks, Dan. I'm just going to start sharing my screen now, just so that people are aware of where we are. Okay, now handing over to those who are in the room, I guess. So if you do have any questions, it'd be great to hear from you. Let us know what region or area or borough you're from. And then if you have any questions for Dan or members of LOTI as well, I'm sure Eddie will be happy to take your questions. Yeah, so please do raise your hand if you have any questions. We have a question from Eddie.
Whilst people are mulling theirs, Dan, to you, I mean, what's the typical process if a borough says, oh, we'd like to shift to using this platform for their future procurements? What's involved? Is there any sort of complication of adjusting their processes to align with this, or yeah, what does it normally entail?
From a technology point of view, we aren't integrated with existing procurement portals, for example, Proactis. However, the amount of information or data that needs to be entered into the social value exchange to set up auctions or for suppliers to take part is minimal. It literally takes a couple of minutes to set up an auction. So long as there is a link within the tender documentation that's shared with suppliers, then in terms of changing internal processes, it's very straightforward, very minimal from a kind of labour intensive point of view.
That's good to know. That's good to know. And the figure that you shared in terms of for each pound spent, was it 233 in increased value? Can you just maybe unpick? So what's going on there? How does the platform lead to that increased value compared to what you see councils doing at the moment?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we had an independent researcher come in and provide that evaluation. So it's really a kind of return on investment for council. So for every kind of pound that the council spends, they get that back in terms of both the tangible resources that are generated, plus the additional social value. So that number is essentially made up of the value of the resource that's given to those local community projects, plus the value that's then generated by those community projects with the resource that they've received. So it's like the input value of the resource plus the outcome value essentially put together. So that's the calculation. But again, I would always kind of apply some skepticism to those kinds of ratios, essentially driven by financial proxies, which the irony is that's very much not the approach that we take to our own evaluation. But that's how the number was calculated. I can share the research with anybody if they would like to have a look. Yeah.
Thank you. And I guess a key question we often come across from a LOTI side is our primary community is often some of the technologists within boroughs, but we've been doing a lot of work with procurement leads and on various projects, others, depending on what we're trying to achieve. For this, which colleagues are you tending to talk to within a local authority to get this implemented? Is it the VCS community liaison leads as well as procurement, or who's the key community that needs to be aware of the platform?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite challenging because social value is such a kind of cross-cutting kind of program. We have to have the heads of procurement involved and on board early on. We do need a sponsor, and that's typically the exec director for finance or resource tends to be our sponsor. And yeah, in terms of outside of the council, outside of the contracting authority, we've been doing this for 5 years now, and we've got the scars to prove it. We've pretty much made every mistake in the book, but we know now that if you don't have the community sector involved or in the room early on, then you are just storing up a whole heap of problems. Resource within the sector is incredibly scarce. So if you don't do things in a transparent and equitable way, then it can resort to pretty difficult challenges and pretty difficult conversations. So there's a way of doing it that works. We're certainly not asking or expecting contracting authorities to allow the local community sector to have any kind of say in the technical procurement process. But in terms of things like outcomes, in terms of the more politically tinged decisions and the policy decisions, having the community sector involved early on is pretty important. And then, of course, within the council as well, it's the actual budget holders. Often we work with heads of procurement who will be sharing best practice, who will be leading on some of the bigger procurements, and we typically do support the bigger procurements. But yeah, you have to have the client has to be in the room, the budget holder has to be there as well. So there are a number of stakeholders that we have to engage. But yeah, Director of Resources and Finance, the budget holder, head of procurement inside the council, and then outside, typically the local VCSC infrastructure body, so the CVS.
That's really useful to hear, and just to go into it with eyes open of that context, but that trying to get those right people from the start involved sounds very sensible indeed. And it sounds like if in due course, it'd be great if maybe we could encourage both Tower Hamlets and Hackney to report back on how they've been getting on with the platform, so we get that sort of the borough lens on how they've found that engagement. But that sounds really good.
Yeah, very, very, very much so. I mean, So when we first went into Tower Hamlets, I think they've been through some trials and tribulations politically over the years, in the recent past, and we are working with an extremely effective and careful head of procurement over at Tower Hamlets, and in a way, it's been a real challenge, but in other ways, it's kind of galvanized us in the sense of, if we can show it to work somewhere with an incredibly careful head of procurement that is very cognizant of the regs and making sure that the social value exchange fits in within those regs, then we're kind of confident that we can make it work anywhere. So we'd be very happy to have the Tower Hamlets guys come across and talk to the group, and also Hackney as well, and perhaps we could look at some of our other customers in other kind of verticals. So we do a lot of work, for example, with housing associations. Slightly different context, but same kind of outcome.
And we haven't seen hands yet, which I think just means you gave a very comprehensive overview of the product, for which we're really grateful. If anyone listening in today is interested to follow up with you and learn more, what's the best way for them to do that?
Well, they can reach me at my sort of personal work email, which is dan@socialvalueexchange.org, or they can kind of drop the business line at hello@socialvalueexchange.org. And if there are any Twitterers out there, then we're also on Twitter. So yeah, but I suggest just drop me a line. I mean, if this presentation is going to be shared, then I'm happy to pick up with people afterwards or offline. That's no problem.
That's great. Well, I think we'll share the video with our community, and we can also maybe distribute to the attendees those email addresses that you've just shared.
Sure.
Would be welcome. In that case, last chance for anyone else who had a question for Dan. Joyce.
Hi everyone. I may have missed, but obviously I didn't hear about. Does it actually cost the local authority to be using the platform? Does it cost us, or? Yes.
There is a cost for the council. We have a number of different ways of doing that. For example, the social value exchange looks after a whole load of activities. So from onboarding all stakeholders, including suppliers and community projects, through to the use of the auction, through to allocating resource to community projects, through to tracking and evaluating the allocation of and use of those resources. So you can buy the whole thing, or what we've done also is unbundle some of those activities and rebundle them up. So for example, you can just use the auction if you want, or you can just use the matching with community-based organizations if you want. So we have 3 different products with 3 different prices, and then again you can pay for over a year, over 2 years, over 3 years, and we price by volume. So for example, if you want to put £50 million worth of spend through over 12 months, it costs X. If you want to put £100 million through over a year, it's slightly different. So again, happy to share that information with anybody offline that would like that.
Yes, please. I think it would be good.
Yeah, no probs.
Yeah.
Joyce, are you happy for us to connect you directly with Dan to be able to follow up on that?
Yeah, that's fine. That's great.
Great, we'll do that.
Thank you.
Any last takers? Yes, we'd say a hand raised. Sorry, I'm only seeing your initials at the moment. AH.
Hi, yeah, my name is Ilaria. I work in the Hammersmith and Fulham Council. I think this is quite interesting, but in terms of social value, because we're also interested in things like apprentices or skills, upskill people, especially in the recovery phase. Is it like a platform like that? Do you offer like the option to do like something similar for people looking for jobs, for example?
Yeah, whenever we start working with councils, there tends to be a bit of an internal bun fight between economic development and the procurement team. So the economic development team want to make sure that they're maxing out their apprenticeships and job placements and things like that. So we're able to include any resource within the platform so long as we can put a value to it. And that value can be in pounds, but more often than not now it's points. So if you remember, a laptop was worth 250 credits, I think it was. So we can put in an apprenticeship and that could be worth 500 credits, and have suppliers again competing to offer, you know, the number of apprenticeships that they believe will get them the tender points from the auction. So we can include apprenticeships, we can include job placements. That doesn't see us linking the apprenticeship with a community organisation, but we are able to maximise the number of apprenticeships that can be generated through the procurement exercise. Does that answer your question, Ilaria?
Yes, thank you. Is there any example, any other council that have used that approach?
Yeah, so Tower Hamlets have used it. I suspect that Hackney will want to go down that road. There'll be a mix of, you know, kind of laptops and tablets, but also, you know, Hackney will have an economic development team that will want to include apprenticeships as well. So those staple social value items are always in there. I think I included a slide with the other organisations that we've worked with, and all of them have had that mix of kind of tangible resource like laptops, but also including those apprenticeships.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, obviously the prices would be good to have that information, because otherwise.
Yeah, well, yeah. If the LOTI guys can share, put us together afterwards, I'm happy to send that stuff out to you.
Right, thank you.
Yep, we can definitely do that. We got EA now. Sorry, I'm struggling to see full names, but go ahead. Oh, Elise. Sorry.
Elise, yeah, hi. I'm from Hounslow, and I was wondering how bespoke the tendering points can be if the council wants to add, you know, say rather than 250 points for laptops, you could say 500 for laptops, or and yeah, kind of weighing the procurement that way, and how bespoke that can be done for each organisation.
Yeah, so so behind the points and the pound system that we use, we've partnered with DataKind, which is it's a global charity that helps social enterprises improve their use of data. So working with DataKind, we have up-to-date kind of prices of most of the, or all of the resources within our database. So we know that a laptop, like a median generic laptop, is worth X. So we have that as the basis from which to determine how much an item is worth on the platform, whether that's in points or pounds. However, we are able, we say to our customers, look, if you want to increase the points, it's entirely up to you. You may want to make laptops more valuable, because at the moment they really are needed. So we have a kind of rational, robust model from which to work from. But in the setup, you are able to determine how many points each item is worth.
Great, thank you.
Do we have any other hands up? Last chance to shout out.
I think Ilaria has her hand up, but I'm not sure if that's just...
Oh, so is that a legacy hand, or is this... Oh,
no, it's gone down.
No worries. In that case, Dan, thank you very much indeed for presenting. So we'll release this video for the community. So if you want to watch it again, any of our attendees today, or forward to colleagues, you'll be able to have a look there, and we'll connect you, as we promised to, with those who've raised an interest at this stage, and we can share your contact details to the rest. For now, though, thank you everyone for attending. We hope this has been a useful session, and look forward to catching up with you all soon.
Thanks, Eddie.